Hello, welcome. I am Chris Menard. We're here for getting started with pivot tables in Microsoft Excel. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm also on YouTube. The chat box should be running in both. Let's go ahead and get started. I'll share my screen. All right, this is the list of what we're going to cover. Item number one is what is a pivot table? Pivot tables are already in Microsoft Excel. It's the easiest way to summarize and analyze data. So our very first worksheet is a worksheet full of customers. And I always ask this question before I create a pivot table. I've got my header row in row one. And the question I ask myself is, okay, what columns or fields have data that repeats? Those are usually the columns or fields that we're going to have in our pivot table. We usually also need something numeric, not all the time, but usually. And we'll also get into date fields today. So going across here, I do see state in column E. I see city in column D. And the states repeat and the cities repeat. Source also repeats. That is how they found out about us and signed up to be a customer. Google Ad Magazine. And then we have two numeric fields, purchases to date, income, and then finally we have one more field that repeats, and that is what type of household type in column K are there. So here you go with the pivot table. Here's an easy one. I want to know what is the total purchases to date for every state. I have actually seen people do this. So this is something not to do. They go and they sort by state. And then they start inserting rows. I'm going to just do one row here. And then they total up the purchases to date. And so there is California, 8,023. And they continue to do that. I just did undo a couple times. Don't do that. Here we go with our pivot table. Insert tab at the top. My data starts in column A and it stops in row K36. Insert tab, pivot table. That was my second click. Click number 3 is it picked up A1 to K36. It's going to put it in a new worksheet. So I click OK. That was the third click. And click number 4, I want to pick on the states. It puts them in the rows area of my pivot table fields. And all the header rows that I had running from left to right in my pivot table are now going up and down in here, by the way, in the exact same order. So I check state, it drops it to the rows. And the question was, what is the purchases to date for every state? Excel is smart enough to know that this was a number field. So when I check it, it is going to put it in this values box right here. Watch this, check. And there I go. There are the purchases to date for every state. That is a pivot table right there. So I'm going to go back to my data source, which was customers. So I quickly took this data range and quickly analyzed and figured out what the purchases to date are for every state. Let's keep going with this. So if you notice, it's summing these up, sum of purchases to date. I'm actually, since I've already checked this once, I'm just going to drag it again and drop it in the values. But I don't want the sum again. I'm just going to double click cell C3. And it says value field settings. I also would like to know what was the average for every state. So I made it average. Click OK, and there's my averages. And I'm going to just do a quick format of these numbers. I don't need any decimals. And one more just to show you this. I'm going to take purchases to date again, drag and drop. Double click cell D3. These are very popular functions in Excel. Sum, average, maximum, minimum. I want to know what's the max for every state. Click OK, and there you go right there. So that was pivot table number 1, taking our data and quickly making a pivot table. Let's go use the same worksheet again. Since we're in getting started with pivot tables, I'm going to go ahead and tell you what I would do. Whenever I make a worksheet that has a pivot table, this is just me, but you should come up with some naming conventions for yourself. I'm going to double click sheet 1 to rename it. I like to do PT for pivot table, and then whatever this is about, this was states or state totals, whatever you want to call it. I'm just going to call it states. So I know that this worksheet contains a pivot table. It's got PT in it when I look at the name. Back to customers, here comes pivot table number 2. So this time I'm going to use the fields state, city. I'm going to still use purchases to date, and I'm going to use household type. So we're going to use 4 fields in this example. Same steps, insert, pivot table. Picked up my range, click OK. Same information over here. I do want to share something with you though real quick. This is the default pivot table fields layout. If you don't like this layout, and I put this here intentionally just so you would see the default, you can come in here and say, you know, I want to see a different layout. I want to see the field sections and the area sections side by side. This is what I normally use right here instead of this default being number 1. I'm going to use it this time. You can widen this also if you don't like where it's at. So now I've got my fields running here and the 4 different areas right here. So here we go. I'm going to use all 4 of these areas this time because the first one I just did is the first time I just used rows and values. But here I go again. I'm going to check state. I'm going to check purchases to date. Very similar to what we had before. But also want to see city. The default is when you check something that's text, it's going to drop it in the rows again. So here's cities. Watch this. California, there are the 3 cities for California. My state, Georgia, there are the 3 cities for Georgia, on and on. I'm also going to check source. This is how they found out about us. And then, so now we got state, San Diego, and the 2 sources, which are LinkedIn Magazine. Now, if you don't like this layout, I'm going to go in and change it again. Even though I do, I'm going to go back to the default for you because this is how it's probably going to be on your screen by default. Let's just go here. Here is why they call it a pivot table. I don't like where source is sitting here in the rows. I'm going to drag it, and I'm just pivoting the field and putting it in the columns area. It'll now run across row number 4. Right here where I'm selecting Google Ads over to magazine. So that is why they call it a pivot table. I'm going to do it again. I'm going to drag it and drop it back. Let's say I don't like this. I'm making this up. I don't even want to see city. I can lose city. That means that X means I'm going to lose it. If you don't like that method, you can click here and say remove field. You're not deleting the field. You're just removing it from the pivot table. There you go. The reason, again, I can move this up, I don't like source because right now it's state then source. I'm going to take the source and put it above the state. Now I've got Google Ads with the states below them. But I do want to go back to this look right here, though, that I initially had with states and cities, source being in the columns and purchases to date right here. So when you're in a pivot table, and this is just some easy stuff, I've got 2 contextual tabs for my pivot table. Pivot table analyzes one, design is the second. If you click outside of your pivot table, 2 things are going to happen. My field list is going to disappear, but also these are called contextual tabs versus the other tabs that I'm slowly mousing over, because this home tab is always here, insert's always here. So here I go. I'm going to click in column J and watch this. My pivot table field list disappeared because I'm not in my pivot table. And also the 2 contextual tabs that I had sitting up here are no longer here. Back inside the pivot table, I want to talk now about this grand total column and also about subtotals. You don't see the word subtotals, but here you go. California, 1,500, 553 for Facebook. These are subtotals. These are going to be found on the design tab, both the subtotals and your grand totals. I'm going to start off with the subtotals. So look at row 5, look at row 9, and look at row 13, and that's enough to look at. When I go to subtotals, do not show subtotals. This is all a matter of preference. I'm going to click this, and those rows that had numbers in them are still there, but the numbers have disappeared. I said, do not show the subtotals. I can also come back in here and say, instead of showing the subtotals at the top, which you're just looking at, I may want to see the subtotals at the bottom of the group. So now I've got a California total. It moved down to row 9. My Georgia total is in row 14. So there are your options for your subtotals right here. I'm going to just put them back at the top for now to keep this easy. Concerning my grand totals, I've got a grand total in column H. I have a grand total in row 23. Again, it is up to you. Grand totals off for column and rows. Now I don't have any grand totals. Grand totals, I'm going to go to the third one down, rows only. There they are sitting over in column H, and it's called rows only because they're grand totaling the rows. In case you're wondering, it is in column H, but it is showing the row totals. Grand totals, columns only. This is going to put it down in row 23, and it did. And then finally, the default rows and columns, the second item right here. Very good. I'm going to take a quick break and see if there's any questions real quick. Okay. Let's keep on going. Another option, since we're still using the design tab, the contextual tab for pivot tables, look at the third item over. It's called your report layout. One of my favorite features is right here. This layout, and you're about to see this, is called compact, because if you notice, I've got my state and my cities all showing in column A. I want the cities to move over into column B and to be in a column by themselves. Report layout, compact is the default layout. The one that I use quite a bit is tabular form. This is how Excel used to be for the default. When I click here, watch this, watch my cities. They are now sitting in column B by themselves. The other one you have, if you notice that California and San Diego are right on the same row. Another popular one is outline. If I go here, the cities will still be in column B, but they moved down one, if you notice that. So it's blank right here in cell B5, but here they are. And of course, you can come back here to compact if you like that one, no problem. You also have this other nice feature here. Do you want to put blank rows between your groups? Notice row 9 has Georgia, row 13, Illinois. When I click here, I'm going to tell it to insert a blank line after each item. So watch this. It automatically put in blank lines after each item. It just may be easier to read. It is, again, just a matter of preference here, and you can remove that line after each item. Gone. Table styles, really simple. This is very similar to using table styles. This is pivot table styles, though. I've got blue, I've got red. So your live preview does work. I'm not clicking on these. I'm just moving the mouse over them. Find one you like, click on it. Those are pivot table styles. And when you're running styles, you get these pivot table style options. So these two, pivot table styles and pivot table style options, go hand in hand. I want to see banded rows. There they are. I want to see banded columns. There they are. So good. I am going to go make another pivot table now. This time I'm going to use the one item I didn't use, which is filter. So again, real simple, and then we'll move on to a completely different file. Insert pivot table, click OK. I believe you got this one now. State, city, I'm going to pick a different item. I know that I want the household type. This is whether somebody's couple, family, or single. I know that I want it in the column, so just drag it over here. Here is when, and I'm going to take income instead of purchases to date. We know what their household income is for some reason. We got it. There it is. Notice that state and city are sitting here, but I have not used filters. If you look up at A1 and B1, nothing is there. I'm going to take state and put it in the filters area. And now in cell A1 and B1, I have all in a drop down. This is a cool feature. I'm looking at every city, regardless of the state. I want to see just California. There you go. And it turns into a funnel, just like a filter and funnel would in a range or a table. I just want to see Georgia. There you go. If you want to see multiple items, you can right here. So there are the cities for those two states. Okay. Keep on moving. Now on this spreadsheet, we have a lot of data. Just to show you how much data we have, I happen to be in cell C2. I put my mouse on the bottom, but make sure you don't have autofill. And just double click. I just jump to the bottom. We have 999 records of data. Back to the top, what I want to point out here, I'm going to mess with dates on this one. So if I sit here and I'm just going to scroll through here, if you notice, I got dates for 2020. And if I keep moving down, I've got dates for 2021. Those dates are month, day, and year. Well, watch what pivot tables will do for you when you have date fields. I want to know what is the total for every year, and I've only got 2 years. What's the total invoice amount? Insert, pivot table. It picks up my data. Click OK. I'm going to check invoice date. Watch what it does. It is smart enough to group those by the year. And then I'm going to check the invoice amount. Now, over here to the right, it put in months, quarters, and years. So it took that date field of month, day, and year and made it broken out by years, quarters, and months. Let me zoom in so you can see this. If I expand 2022, look, quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4. Same with 2020 and 2021. And if I expand a quarter, I should see January through March. And just by chance, there's April through May. So apparently there's some months that don't have data in them, which is fine. If you don't like this, let's say I don't even care about quarters. I just want to see the years and months. Again, I'm on Pivot Table Analyze. And if you notice the group field, this is called a group, filter group, data group. There's a group called group, which is kind of crazy they did that. It's available to me. If I click over in column B, though, notice it's grayed out. So you actually need to click on a date for this to work. I'm going to ungroup it first. Now, all I'm doing is looking at every invoice date that I had, and it's totaling up the amount. But when I come to group selection, this is where it is smart enough to pick up the first date I had in my data range. It picks up the last date. And now the question is, okay, what is it you want to see? I want to see years and months, but I don't want to see quarters. If I didn't want to see the months, I would uncheck it. So it's just a matter of checking and unchecking. I'm not holding down control. I'm just clicking and unclicking. So I should have the 2 years and all the months within those years. Let's see if that works. And I do. Look down in my right-hand corner here on the rows. It did this automatically. What is cool is I can do this. I want to see 2020 and 2021 next to each other. I believe you already know this. We'll just drag this and drop it into the columns. And there I go. Do I care about the grand totals? I'm making this up. No, I don't. We know that's on the design tab. Grand total. And I'm going to do off for columns only. So I still got the grand totals down there in row 17, and there are my numbers right here, so I can look at these and compare them. And I'm just going to quickly format them so you can see them easier. There you go. So that was using dates. All right. One more example, and we'll wrap up. I've got a great one for you here. So I'm getting a little bit into pivot tables advanced here. Now, I haven't done it in this entire session, but I would encourage you. This is a data range, A1 through whatever that is, F1000. Just to keep this easy, I haven't done this, but in real life, change that data range into a table before you make a pivot table. So you can either do Control T, which is what I like to do. You can do Insert Table. You can make it a table here. Multiple ways to make it a table. I like Control T. Works on a PC. So it works on a Mac. Works on the Windows computer. Control T. Create a table. Do you have a header row? Yes, it's row 1. Hit OK. And look, I'm very similar to the pivot table styles. I've got it here for the table. The reason you want to make it a table is if you add records at the bottom of it and refresh your table, it'll automatically pick it up. With the data range, if you add records at the bottom of a data range and refresh the pivot table, it will not include the updated records, the records you added. So always make it a table first. Here we go with a really fancy one. This is a little bit of Pivot Tables Advanced. I've got these car brands over here, GM, Toyota, Mazda. So let's go make a pivot table first. Insert, pivot table. It's calling it table 1 because that's the name of my table. Hit OK. Brand, invoice amount. I'll zoom in. I'm just going to format these numbers real quick just to make them easy to see. What else do I want to see? I want to see the name of the dealership running around the columns. So here we go. This is looking good. I don't like the layout of this. So I'm going to go to design. When I say the layout, the colors, I'm going to just change it to this one right here. Here is the cool tip I have for you. I have all these car brands sitting here. I've got a total of 10 of them, by the way. It says the count's 10. I want a pivot table for every one of these car brands. And I decide I also want to see the rep. So I'm going to put the rep below the brand. We've already covered this. I could have put the rep above the brand, but I want the rep below the brand. I'm still looking at this and I'm like, I wish I had a pivot table for Acura, for BMW, Fiat. You can do that. So instead of having to make 10 pivot tables, I'm going to let Excel do it for me. I'm going to take the car brand and you have to put this in the filter. So whatever it is you want a pivot table for has got to be in the filter. I pick car brand up here and look, there they are. You're going to go to Pivot Table Analyze tab. All the way over to the far left is a group called Pivot Table. I cannot stand the name of this because it's just not the best name. When you hit the arrow for options, it is this second one down. It is called Show Report Filter Pages. Horrible name. Click it once. It knows that it's a brand. When I click OK, I'm going to get 10 new tabs at the bottom of my Excel file. One's going to be named Acura. One's going to be named BMW, GM. Watch when I click OK right here. Watch this. Acura, BMW, Fiat, Ford. How about that cool trick with a pivot table? I appreciate your time. I'm going to come back with a, this was getting started with pivot tables. We will come back with the pivot tables Intermediate, and also PivotTables Advanced, because there's a lot more stuff you can do in PivotTables that I didn't get to today, but I'm slowly doing these things to get you all up to date on PivotTables. I really appreciate your time. Feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you have any comments or questions, you can always put them in there, or just send it to me on LinkedIn also. Thank you.